I am Marwan Cameron, and this is The Conduit. All right, everyone. It is Wednesday, March 2nd. You know what time it is. 12 p.m. We are like the post office. It is tipping points and puzzle pieces with Mark from Roseco, as he has in his list there. Let's go ahead and give him a round of applause. How are you doing today, sir?
I am awesome.
I'm glad to hear that. So we meet every day at every Wednesday at 12. Here we are again. I think you actually numbered the episode. I think we're on what, episode 9.
We are on episode 9.
I enjoy the consistency, sir. I appreciate that. That is definitely important, especially if we are going to, realize the change that we are trying to make in our communities.
It has to be measured.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It does need to be
So
measured.
I would like to start this off by saying to people that the Innovation for All Challenge you see up here is just launched as of yesterday. I was hoping to have an invitation video up. We had some technical difficulties, meaning that I didn't know what the heck I was doing and tried it several times. Today we finally have one up. It's in the process of being going through the YouTube processing, but there is a live link on the Kitsap Resiliency Project page. Please go look at it. It's 4.5 minutes, and I think you'll find it very, very good information, and you'll be excited about the project.
All right, I like that. If you do get a chance during the hour mark, if you'll drop that link in the chat, then I will also make that available to everyone for sure.
Okay, and I'm
That
doing
is
that right now.
definitely important. I'm enjoying your background there. And as you can see, everyone, let me just go ahead and enlarge back on Mark there. You can see the website, which I put in the chat every week so that you have access to that. I'm going to go ahead and put the chat in there for that 4.5 minute video. So go and check that out. And this is just the first of several. Is that true, Mark?
This is the first. This is the invitation to Innovation for All, but there are going to be several videos. I've got one working now on perspective and paradigm shifts.
Gotcha. Perspective and paradigm shifts. All right. I look forward to checking that out once those launch. So, again, stay tuned for that. Definitely be a treat. Definitely spur discussion and make you think for sure. So, today, what are we talking about today, Mark?
Oh, I don't know. I thought we'd include some stuff like inclusiveness. We
Inclusiveness.
actually we started having a conversation last Wednesday, and I'll remind you about that because I know you're a very very busy man. That the question that was on the table between the two of us was, how do we get a diverse group of voices so the project actually reflects everyone? And that's a big question. And I honestly said, I don't know. I have no idea how we're going to manage to happen, but it's necessary. It is a vital and key part of what we're going to be doing. So, how do we get the broadest, most diverse range of voices so that we have a fuller representation?
Ooh. Well, let me go ahead and put the question in the chat. I take it you're posing that to me. Is that what's happening here?
I'm posting it to you and anybody who wants to jump in. I know that Christina posted this to PLOC,
Okay.
and I reached out to Martitha and Christina and asked them to join in. Christina's on a plane right now, and Martitha was going to post it to her stuff, but I didn't get an affirmative for coming on the show. And since I'm assuming she hadn't reached out to you, they would be really good people to have talking to us. But
Right. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and I love my definitions because we do need to have a common framework to
we
have these
do.
conversations from. Right. I think we can go left or right immediately and unintentionally just because people have a different meaning for the word that we're talking about. So again, I'm just going to Webster's dictionary here.
Okay.
Inclusion, the action or state of including or of being included within a group or structure. Federal legislation now mandates the inclusion of students who are English language learners. A second definition, the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized, such as those who have physical and mental disabilities and members of other minority groups. As an example, we value and promote diversity and inclusion in every aspect of our business. I would say that's probably cap. But definitely something to work toward, for sure. So those are your definitions. I'm going to go ahead and put both of those in the chat, one um, all together, and then I'll separate it out because it's pretty long there.
Okay.
And to answer that question, since it has been posed to me, I kind of look at it from inclusion and then also diversity. One of the things that I would constantly talk about when I was teaching and advising in Olympic College was the need for diversity of thought. And so for me, that obviously would be inclusive, right? Because then you would need all the voices at the table. And often what you have, and what we see in our legacy media or mainstream media, as it will, you get a lot of myopic viewpoints of what's pushed out. Whether you're watching Fox News, you're going to get a myopic viewpoint based on their lens, or if you're watching CNN or MSNBC, you're going to get a myopic viewpoint based on what they see. But there are a lot of folks that are, in the middle, further left, further right, and all around, that have different thoughts and opinions on things, and those voices are never elevated or heard. And that is one of the main reasons why the conduit exists, is to elevate the voices that don't get elevated, the ideas that don't get brought to the forefront, so that can happen. And so that's why it is this show has such a wide range. When people ask, well, what is your show? And it's kind of hard to define that, right? It's called The Conduit, and it's based on two-way um, access, right? So access of us putting information out, whoever us is, and us is everyone, and then at the same time allowing others to bring their voices to the table, also. And I think that's why G2 and the Conduit and Reseco resonate with each other, because that's really what we're trying to do, right? It's the whole bring your puzzle piece to the table. And because I'm in a position that I can provide this platform for people, then that's what I want to do. And so that is what inclusion means to me. But I look at it, for me, especially in this regard of what we're talking about, is that diversity of thought, that diversity of idea. And in order to have that, you really do have to have all of these people at the table, and bringing their ideas forward. And then, in a way where it's not, oh, I've got one of this and I've got one of that. I mean, it could be Noah's Ark, but it's also
It can't
impossible
be
to have an
tokenism.
even number
Yeah, it
of
can't be tokenism. You can't have your
right. It
token.
can't be
You can't be
tokenism.
checking your box off and say, okay, I got my black person, I got my Native American, I've got my Puerto Rican. Okay, that's all I need.
So yeah, absolutely. And then the ideas that come forth have to actually really be taken a look at. Well, I had a surprise for you. We have a special guest today that is joining
Ah,
us. Martitha is joining us.
oh, she is
And
good.
she's getting her camera set. I didn't want to tell you that. It was a little surprise for you there, Mark.
Okay, well, before she hops on, let me kind of add to what you've been saying.
Go ahead.
Our model doesn't work if we don't have the broadest range of voices that we can possibly get. The puzzle pieces have to be from everywhere. Otherwise, it's not a human puzzle because humans come in all shapes, colors, sizes, preferences, and everything else. So if we don't hear from them, we can't create a human centric, resilient community. Can't happen. We can have something, but it won't be that.
Right.
Resilience requires all voices.
And I think what for me, let me bring Martita on. Um, if you look at homelessness, right?
Hmm.
Oftentimes, people that are experiencing homelessness are not at the table and trying to find the solutions to homelessness, right?
Exactly.
And then I think that's where we go wrong because we need to understand what their needs are, and what their ideas are, and what the issues are from their perspective.
And their
Oftentimes we
stories
can.
of how they got there, because there's so much misinformation about homelessness that we can easily put them in the them category, not us category,
Right.
and we need to stop that nonsense. I was going to say a different word, but I decided it's going to be family friendly.
All right, Martita, if you are there, let us know. I see her. Um, I brought her into the show, but she's not showing up as an option here. So we'll see if she can work on that piece on. There
There she
we
is.
go. That's what I'm talking
Hey,
about. All right. And she's on the phone as Martita is definitely a busy woman. So we will continue on to Martita, can you hear us?
I
You're
think you're
muted.
muted. I can't hear you. She can't hear us.
Yeah, let me let her know that.
You can hear us. We can't hear you.
You may be on mute, Martita. Type in the chat there. Type in the chat. You can if you can see that. So she's gonna come out and come back in. But yeah, to me that is one of the reasons why I think we don't solve the issues in a more a fundamental way where you talk about uh sustainability, right? So we might be able to sustain, and we are sustaining in some ways and failing in so many others when it comes to homelessness. But the resiliency of solving that problem is missed because we don't have folks that are experiencing homelessness at the table. And oftentimes, maybe there are people that have experienced homelessness that want to give back and jump into that arena and also try to solve the problem. But you do need all these folks here, and we can't be afraid to try some things. And if it doesn't work, then you retweak it and you try something else. But everything that we have tried thus far hasn't worked. So the answer
So,
is clearly not in the circles that we're currently in right now.
yep. And so we're to the question of today is, how do we get to people to include them? How do we bring them to the table?
Well, let me type that in the chat. The I will give an example. Usually, you and I have our pre meeting before the show,
Yeah.
and there was a post meeting from the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art. So, shout out to them. And I have been covering for Black History Month artists at the Bainbridge Island Museum and actually hosting the podcast from the gallery there. And so at the end of the month, they had a march to the movie theater at Bainbridge Island, had a panel discussion, and then they had another panel discussion back at the museum. And so they wanted to debrief and talk about what worked well, what didn't work well, what we would do different, and what we would do more of. And so they were very inclusive in that regard, right? And so, my part to play in that was done, but they invited me to the debrief. They were, very thankful for the efforts, and then they were able to provide critique, right, on what worked well and what didn't work well, even from the part that the conduit and G2 had to play in that, and so very appreciative because we don't improve unless that happens, right? So that's another thing when you talk about how to bring people to the table. People have to come to the table prepared, right? You come to the table with your appetite ready to eat. You have to come to the table ready to collaborate and be inclusive and answer the problems. And you have to be prepared to take critique, to give ideas, to participate, right? So I think that's one of the big things is we have several people who want to do this work and in siloed ways do some of this work. But now it's time to say, okay, you know what? You've worked with these folks, in the past, and maybe you can improve there. But now it's time to reach out and maybe work with some folks that you haven't worked with, and bring yourself ready to the table, to figure out how you can collaborate. And really, honestly, that's how you and I got together, right? I didn't know you last
Absolutely.
year, right? And
Nope.
we do a show like right now, as Bremerton Housing Authority have these huge organizations in KCR, but Rose Echo is small. You're the only organization that has a weekly show on the conduit, right? But that's what the work looks like. And so it's saying, hey, look, this is a way to innovate, because that word is behind you, and I love it. And there's a way to be inclusive and say, you know what? How can we synergize what we do together and make this thing, um, you know, really work on the issues that hold on there. I'm sorry, Martita. Sorry to stop my thought. She's texting me here. Sorry, I can't update.
Okay.
I wasn't able to hear you, but something's going on. So she's having a problem with her computer, so she apologizes. So we will miss her this time. We'll try to get her on at another time.
Okay.
Um, so I lost my thought there.
It's okay.
I wanted to make sure that I had her.
I'm gonna tie into that thought right there. I've talked to several other organizations now, and I come to the question about community because they all have community in their name,
Mm,
and there seems to be a, oh God, is there a nice way to say this? An echo chamber issue
mhm,
where community is talking about community, not talking to the community.
right.
And our need for driving this is to talk to the community and have, more importantly, the community talk to us. And the community is with a giant C, the diverse community that is everyone who lives here.
Mm,
So how when I talk to people, I say, well, we're a community organization. Okay, what part of the community do you talk to? How do you connect to them? And where are they? And how can we talk to them? And this is a challenge for everyone. So the big question on the table is, how do we get the community to talk to us, especially the community that is distrustful, which is a large portion of people today. And I think that's regardless of color, gender, economic status, people are distrustful of putting their head up and raising their voice.
well, what I mean, you have
Question.
cancel culture. You have
Yeah.
it's not it's not a safe space for you to let your ideas be heard. That's for sure.
So how
There's
do we make it
ridicule,
safe?
there's judgment, there's shame. There's a bunch of things that kind of go along with that.
Yeah. We are measured and judged at every level in this culture that we have. And for lack of a better word, between you and I, we can call it what Daniel Quinn and Ishmael calls it, the taker culture. We are very much in the middle of a taker culture where it's gaining, um, about gaining and acquiring, and not about community or people. Matter of fact, to revert back to the Innovation for All challenge that I put out in the 4-minute video, um, I talked about the some of the problems that we face and how we need to overcome them. And one of the things I said is that profit trumps service. In fact, in reality, if we're being honest, profit trumps everything, including our humanity.
You know, I'll tell a story. I was yeah, I didn't graduate from high school. I went to the ninth grade, and I didn't step foot back into an academic setting, aside from learning the trade of brick masonry until I was 24, scared to death, right? And so, I go through getting this education that takes way longer than what they say, right? And I end up getting to the point where I can take a job at Olympic College and actually teach, which is awesome. And you've worked so hard to get yourself to that place, and you've got student loan debt, and you've got this, and you've got a family. And so the stakes are high. And the one thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to make waves, right? And so you don't speak up and you don't speak out because, you being canceled can cause it to where you can't take care of your family. Um, and that, you don't have other opportunities, right? You can get blacklisted pretty quickly. And so I lived in that space for a while from 2012 to about 2018 or so. And as I grew, um, I began to see that me keeping my mouth closed wasn't actually helpful to myself or the people around me, especially the people that I was trying to serve, which were my students, and began to become more and more of an advocate. Um, when I was thinking about starting a podcast, the people that were encouraging me to do that, shout out to Tiffany Diamond and several others. The question was, that you're going to be attacked for your views. Your views are not popular. They're very critical of some powerful entities, powerful people, and they can come for you. And that can cause an issue for your livelihood. It can cause an issue for your organization, which takes care of several people. So there's a concern there. And I'm just at the stage in my life where, I care about it, but I don't care about it. I'd rather live my life speaking my truth, or I hate that phrase actually, speaking what I feel and what I think and what I believe, versus just kind of going along to get along because the tall blade of grass gets cut. And that is very freeing and very empowering. And through doing that, in the 4 years that G2 has been created, and even more so the last year of just having this podcast where everyone has been shut in and have been isolated from folks and each other. I've actually been more collaborative and have met more people and have done more things than I have than the 5 years I was at Olympic College. And so there's a power in that, and it's so freeing to come to that point in your life. Now, does that mean that I can't get canceled tomorrow because I say something that is like, "Oh, that's a big no-no," and you're done, and people don't want to, use G2 and it's a problem? Yeah, that can happen. That's a true risk. But I'm willing to take that risk and just kind of walk into that uh, without fear. And that's what it is. I think if we're going to bring people to the table so that we can be um, collaborative and inclusive, you know, folks are going to have to, like I say, coming to the table prepared. That's part of it, right? There's a part that we have to do as we come forward and say, I'm coming, and this is how I think, and this is how I feel. I want to learn. But I also need to, feel confident in how I feel. But also be ready to, if we're going to collaborate and we're going to put a puzzle together, right? The puzzle piece that you have probably isn't going to look the way that I would want it to look in my vision, right? It's like, no, I think this piece should be a corner piece, and you're like, no, I'm a middle piece, and it's like, well, I got to accept you as a middle piece. That's really what inclusion is about. So.
and that's
Uh,
and that's and that's true. I mean, I don't think that there's been a single moment that, as we've been going through this process of developing this, that I thought that I could in any way, shape, or form determine what somebody else's piece is going to be. I am kind of in that beginner's mind stage. Whatever you bring to the puzzle is going to be a surprise, and it's going to be a delightful surprise because it's a piece to the puzzle. And I have no idea what it's going to look like when it's done. And God, I don't want to know because then it's restricted to what I think,
Well,
and it
what?
can't
And it
be.
may not be delightful, honestly, Mark.
In the end, it will be. Because okay, we are all made up of all of our experiences, good and bad. And I don't know what other people think, but I'm pretty happy with who I am today. And I'm not happy with all of the things I've done, all the experiences I've had, but I'm pretty delighted with who I've become. Same thing with this. It may be a painful moment. It may be an unexpected moment. It may be a really challenging moment as we find what piece fits where. But in the long run, it's going to be delightful because it will bring us to a place where we are together and moving forward. And it can't be just me, it can't be just you. It has to be a diverse round of voices, because without that, the future is going to be what it is today, and it can't be.
So circling back, so how do we get people to the table?
Well, that's the question. I was hoping that we can begin this discussion, and I'd like to bring other people to the table. Maybe we can even do 15 minutes of each of the Wednesday to talk about inclusion, and bring a special guest on that has an expertise or an idea about this, and we can start expanding. Like, as I say, Christina, Martitha, uh, folks from the Akuye,
Well,
Deborah.
I would think I would stop there, right? You already got a lot
Okay,
of leaders in the community, right? So if we're being
right.
inclusive, then you got that covered in spades, right? So it's like, who else needs to be at the table? Folks from the farmers market.
Yeah,
I think definitely should be at this table, right? Obviously, everyone should be,
absolutely.
but those voices are voices that need to be heard, right?
Yeah.
What are their needs? What are their concerns? What are their
And
issues?
and who do we get to represent homeless folks? I mean, is there a spokesperson that is vocal for the homeless people in Kitsap County? Is
I
there
don't
somebody
think there
who has
should
been
be.
homeless?
I don't
Huh?
think there should be. I don't think there should be, and the reason why is that happens in the Black community a lot, right? And someone gets elevated as the spokesperson for all Black people, and Black people are a monolith, right? And so your homeless experience is been very different than mine. And I'll quickly again, when I taught, uh, there were a lot of veterans that would be as my students, and there would be a veteran who would have the GI Bill and all kinds of other resources, and they have their second house and their boat, and then there's a veteran who is staying at Retzel or at in a at the Benedict house and is trying to work on their education and get through, but they don't have you know a
The
20th
resources.
of what this other veteran has, and they're sitting side by side, right?
Yep.
And so it everyone's voice has to come to the table in that regard.
And I was thinking more along the lines of, I agree with you. And I was thinking more along the lines as not necessarily a spokesperson, but somebody who has outreach to that community and can get people to the table, so we have a diverse group from even the homeless community talking about their experiences and their needs, and what their vision of the future would look like if they could perceive that there is one.
Yeah,
And I
I
threw
think
that last bit in because I don't know if they do
if they do what.
perceive a future, or whether they're living moment to moment.
Oh, I think there are a lot of folks that are living moment to moment,
Yep.
unfortunately. uh But yeah, you won't know until those conversations are had, right?
Right.
And that's why I was saying that's where the answers lie with us all, and not from an organization or from the government. It really is going to be with all of us. I think when we're ready to address that question, I think access to that population is rather easy, you know,
Okay.
and I say
I'm
that
glad you
with.
think so. So,
Oh, I say that with a smirk because, for many of us, it's we don't want to see them, right?
mhm.
Yeah, we feel bad. We're empathetic, but at the same time, we don't want you to drive down our property values, and there's drugs and crime and all this other stuff. So, go over there, not over here. So they're accessible, for sure. Is
Okay.
my thought is on that. But, we do wanna start answering this question, so how do we get people to the table? And so I wanna, say that I believe you're doing a good job at that in regards to, Martita saying she can't fix the problem there.
Okay.
No worries. In saying, "You know what? I'm gonna carve out an hour every Wednesday to come and do a show and pose these questions and have this discussion." Again, put yourself in a vulnerable position, uh, and say, "Hey, I'm going to share knowledge, but I'm also going to say that I don't know and that I need your help." The work that you do on Rose Echo and all the research that goes into providing information that is steeped in research and data to provide to people that don't have the time to sift through what's accurate, what isn't, what's the truth, what's the half truth in there. And so you provide that information and, letting people know, look, there are some major concerns that we need to be worried about going forward. And what is that going to look like? Again, you've got Ukraine and Russia, and then that looks like a bad situation. And you have folks fleeing by the hundreds of thousands. And, again, a natural disaster here, it becomes us, pretty immediately. I was watching something, I think on, was it Bo the Fifth column, and he was talking about, sun flares and what can happen uh, to our
Has
system.
happened. Has
It
happened.
has happened, right, right,
Has
but a big
happened.
one can happen, and what's gonna happen, if we don't. I mean, their plan is just to shut everything off, but if they miss that somehow and it comes through and it fries everything, then we could be, put back into the Stone Age for a year before we get back, up and running, and we know that government's gonna get it back up and running, but the individual people, that's gonna lag behind by several years, just like the housing crisis of '08. Um, and so just thinking about all of these things,
Okay,
you have
so
been bringing.
let me give a tip here for
Mhm,
you in this, and it's something that we're going to be starting to practice here fairly soon. Is we're going to be taking a drive with all of our backup material, and we're going to be putting it into a Faraday bag. A Faraday bag is one of those Mylar type of bags,
mhm.
and sealing it and putting it into a safe deposit box at the bank. And we're going to be doing this monthly because the Faraday bag will prevent an EMP from frying the drive.
You want it at the bank though?
Well, in the safe deposit box because it's the most secure place. If there's a disaster, a vault's a hard thing to get to go south, especially if the bank is on solid ground.
Well,
So
yeah, but would you lose access bank?
might, yeah, but at least the data will be secure for when you do get access to it, and you'll also have a backup here at the office.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely has me thinking, I definitely need to turn off, unplug electronics that I'm not using. I have a bad habit of, what do they call it? Vampirism, where your electronics are just sucking off of the electricity even when you're not using them or because they're in
Yeah,
standby. I'm
yeah.
horrible with it. And it's like it's gonna fry everything. And there's some things that just unplug it, so much easier. You might save it that way. I know that we have Sunday we were doing an event and a laptop that we use has our QuickBooks on it, and that laptop went down. And it was like, oh God, uh, everything is
And
on that laptop,
and you don't back it
So
up to the cloud.
no, it is not backed up to the cloud. It's backed up on another computer, but we're rectifying that immediately. Uh
Yeah, that's not the time to figure that stuff out. Yeah,
No, no, no. I mean, we had a backup. We have a backup set, but it's when it happens, it's like, oh man. And I look over at Rob, I'm like, hey, you got a backup for this, right? And he's like, yeah, we got a backup. It's like, all right, that's terrifying. So, and I think he had taken his laptop to Texas, and it's like, hey, it's got to go through the scanner. And I actually lost a device that went through the scanner. I don't know if it was the scanner or not, but I know it worked before it went in there. It didn't work after. And it's like, hey, everything's on there. So it's a concern. But there's so many things that you have to kind of plan for and be ready for in
we
this new age that we're in. I mean, we
we can
have.
yeah, we can have that discussion offline because I have a fairly extensive background in setting up systems to be redundant.
Mm.
So we can talk about simple and fairly inexpensive ways of making sure your data is safe.
So did you used to work for the Department of Redundancy?
No, but I did 20 years in Silicon Valley working as partly as a computer engineer and partly as contingency planner.
Mm. So, yeah, well, I guess we should take it offline, but I was just wondering about cloud storage, like where does that stuff go?
Servers. It's a server farm that somebody's hosting, and we can talk about that. It goes into detail, and we can go into detail about it. Um, Cloud storage is good. but you should always have a physical backup on site as well.
Mm,
I'm
mhm.
I'm, I'm kind of belt and suspenders about data.
I don't know what belt and suspenders about data means. You have to tell me what belt and
Means
suspenders
it
means,
it
sir.
means your belt holds your pants up, but you also put suspenders on that way your pants don't fall down.
Got you. Okay. I'm like, I haven't heard that term. So, you learn
Yeah,
something new every day. I love it. I'm belt and suspenders about that. All right. I'm gonna use
yeah,
that
just
this week.
yeah. Make sure that that your pants don't fall down around your ankles when you least expect it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I'll say
Okay,
again, circling back to that question, one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to do the neighborhood potluck. So again, excited to do that. The weather hopefully is getting better. I'm thinking maybe late April might be nice and warm enough to do that.
I was
The
thinking
first one,
May. I was thinking
May.
mid-May.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. As I'm
But this
so jazzed up, I'm like, I want to do it, pretty quickly, but you do want it to be a nice day. So
well, I kind of want to task you a little bit. Okay, first I'll go to that in a second. You brought up a point earlier, and we started discussing it as we talk about the how. That because of cancel culture, because of all of these aspects, people think that it's not safe, that there's a risk to doing things. So maybe the discussion we need to have is how do we create the how do we create safe space? Though I think that we're doing at Resilient Ecosystems, we're doing a pretty good job of that within the Kids Up Resiliency Project. But how do you get the message out that it's safe space to come raise your voice? That no one's going to dish you for an opinion or make it unsafe for you, make you feel like you're going to lose your job if you want to build a community.
So, that's an interesting question, and I've had this conversation with some other folks about. I actually believe that progress isn't going to be in a safe space, and what I mean by that is, if we look at the way that we teach our, let's say, kindergartners, right? Share with each other, be respectful, say please and thankful, have manners, right? A lot of it is if we go back to that, treat each other like you'd want to be treated, treat others like you want to be treated, then you can come to the table. You can have your opinion. You can disagree with an opinion. Can't really disagree with the fact, but
Oh,
you
well,
can
lots of
have.
people do.
I but if you come to the table, then that's what I mean by coming to the
Yeah.
table prepared, right?
Yep.
You're coming to the table not to wait to jump in just so you can get your point in. You're coming in to share what you have, but also to learn, right? And understand how people feel or think, right? In a respective way. And at the end of it, it's like, okay, I've heard what you said. I've listened, honestly listened, didn't hear to respond. I've listened to what you've said. I've thought about what you've said. I can understand how you see it that way. And either one or three things. Either I'm very staunch in the way that I feel about this still. Maybe you've moved me a little bit and I see that it's a little bit of both, right? Or you've totally convinced me on that. But I can do that in a respectful way where it doesn't have to, there's no need for it to not be a safe space because you should be able to come and be your authentic self, right?
Yeah,
That's what's
and
going to be needed.
you shouldn't fear confrontation.
But it's not even
Be-
confrontation. Why does
No,
it
no,
need to be confrontational?
I'm not saying. I'm saying you shouldn't fear that there will be confrontation because there isn't going to be. Not if people are listening respectfully.
Right. And that's going to take practice, right? I think in theory that sounds good. In practice, it'll be bumpy in the beginning because
Always is.
people get triggered by different things.
So this is the time I'm going to throw out the Miguel Ruiz thing, that I teach in the workshops and we've talked about on several occasions.
Sure.
One of the things that makes it less bumpy is to know without a doubt that it isn't about you. Whatever someone is seeing you, they're seeing you through their life filters and through their experiences and through their perception. And there's another point I want to make after this. And it's not about you. They're not seeing who you are. They're seeing their perception of you through their filters. So why take it personally? It's not about you, it's about their perception of you.
I think that's easier said than done.
It
And you can
takes
say,
You're
or
right. It takes practice.
you can say things to me, and I'll definitely be triggered by it, or a group that I belong to. Uh, Again, a lot of it is,
You have to
the
be present.
spirit and
You
how
have
you
to
say it,
Yeah, you
right?
have to be present, and that brings up this next point I wanted to talk about. When you're talking about having those conversations, one of the things I find is useful and sometimes triggering, though you can't go through life without triggering somebody. But what I like to do is say, okay, so I hear you, but this is what I'm hearing. Is this what you intend to say?
Yes.
Because we have a language problem in this country. I don't know about the rest of the world. I can only talk about here, but we use words sloppily and with limited understanding of what they mean, and we use them differently. And there's no other way it can be because we have a living language. It's changing all the time. So when people say something, they don't always say it in a precise way, and we get triggered by it because it's reflecting through our filters about what we think we're hearing.
Well, here's the
What I
thing, it
like
may
to
be precise to them, Mark. That's
it
that's the that's the
well,
perception, right? It's not
you know,
precise to you, but it's precise to them. I
well,
I understand what I'm saying. You're not understanding. You're not
no,
decoding
that's a
the
point. So
message
what I
I'm
come
giving.
back to is saying, okay, so I hear what you say, but this is what I think I'm hearing. Is that really what you're saying?
Mhm.
Take that moment to clarify, and because people, as I say, there is not. I mean, we use words imprecisely, and they are often loaded with emotion and triggering triggers to me, but that's not what you meant. So by having me stop and go, okay, this is what I'm hearing. Is that what you're saying? That one thing clarifies the communication and diffuses the situation. Unless you're actually telling me I'm an a-hole and you have nothing to do with me, well, then that's then
But
no
that's
matter
good too.
how much I clarify it, that's still what you're saying.
But that yeah, no, but that's good too because that's what you need to know, right? I'd
Yep,
rather,
know
you
it than
tell
not
me how
know it.
you really feel than to shake my hand and, that SOB is da 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 behind my back, right?
Do you know
We're not
why?
gonna get anywhere that way.
Do you know why we shake hands right-handed?
No, I don't.
We shake hands right-handed because that's the hand. Most people are right-handed, and that's the hand you would use to draw your knife or your sword. And if you're shaking somebody's hand with the right hand, you can't be reaching for your weapon. That's
Interesting.
historically why we shake right-handed.
Wow. I smiled because I heard a more crude answer on that, that I won't share here. But
Uh, and for me, I'm left-handed, so SOL.
wow. I don't think I'll be shaking your hand anymore, Mark. We'll have to dap it up. But, to your point, being impeccable with your word is it's the first agreement to me because in order for you to not take things personally, you're gonna have to be impeccable with your word
Yep,
as you push it out there, right?
yep,
Because what you get in return if you're not is gonna be something that you're probably gonna take personally, right? And you're gonna make these assumptions based on it. And so if you're
which goes
trying to
right
do
into
your best,
three.
you
Yep,
know, if you're trying to do your best and you're impeccable with your word, it's the exact reason why, the last two shows we've started with definitions so that we're coming from the same space, right?
right,
Your meaning of the word could be very different from mine or slightly altered. And
absolutely.
that can put us into different corners immediately, but we're saying the same thing. Oftentimes, and you've probably been having a conversation where two people are saying something totally different to themselves, and they're just going back and forth, and it's so heated. And then when they get to the end of it, it's like we were saying the same thing. We were just coming at it from a different way, right?
Happens way
Um,
more than you think it does.
yes, it does. Yes, it does. We can bypass a lot of that
Yep.
and get a lot of
And
good work done and
just to
build trust, right? And
yeah,
equity.
and that brings us back to safe space.
Mhm.
And just I always like to say this: always do your best. Your best isn't the same every day. It isn't. Every minute of every day, it's different. your best is depends on what you're doing. So, when you say always do your best, that puts a lot of pressure on people because they think, well, I've got to be at my best pass, my 110% all the time. You know, you can't be that way. So forgive yourself and be cool, be good with it. Do the best you can at any given moment, and that's all you can do. I don't want that one to put a whole lot of pressure on you because you're not always at 110%.
And I'm typing in the chat here. One of the things that I do is I tell people that my emotional intelligence is low when I'm in a space of high emotion.
Hmm.
And in that time, I'm not going to be impeccable with my word. I'm not trying to do my best because I am deep in my own emotion at that time. And so if I can extend that grace and let someone know that, then what I'm letting them know is I may feel, strongly about this, but right now I'm not in a space where I can articulate this in a way where it's not going to be offensive to you. And so either we should probably stop the conversation or we're going to have to continue the conversation with you understanding that you're going to have to, kind of laser cut through what I mean and not all the emotion that is surrounding it.
But I
And
would
once
I
my
would argue,
emotional intelligence comes back, then we can continue to go forward
yeah.
and we can extend that grace to each other. But we don't often do that, right?
No, we
We
don't. We don't communicate that, and we should.
Yeah, I think about personal relationship, romantic relationships, right? There's a
What are
dust
you
up.
insinuating, Marwan?
you know, there's a dust up and one person doesn't want to talk, but that other person needs to talk. So they keep prodding that person to have that conversation in that space. And when that person goes, you're getting that emotion and then you're off to the races and that's where you're at. And
I think
so
I think I think that we need to have a safe word here. When you're in that space, you just say sweet potato fries,
sweet potato fries.
and then we go get sweet potato fries and let the conversation go until later.
Yeah, the problem though is that the safe word changes every hour, and so I keep forgetting them, and it never stops.
Yeah, but you always want sweet potato fries.
Do that. Well, actually, I like Fritz fries. So those are my
Okay,
absolute favorites.
so fries. It works for either way.
Yes.
So, but I would argue that even when you're in your emotional low and you're struggling, that you're doing your best
Mhm.
because that's the best you can do.
But the other person may not realize that unless you tell them that.
Absolutely,
That's why it's so helpful to do that.
communication is vital, and sometimes you just got to say, "Listen, I really can't have this conversation right now," and the other person needs to respect that.
But you are going to have the conversation soon, because a lot of
Yeah,
times there can be that retreat, and you don't want to discuss it. You don't want to deal with this. Like, no, the issue does need to be addressed and dealt with, just not immediately in this space now. Let me
right.
gather myself so I can do that.
Absolutely.
And then that's the part where it helps for that person not to take things personally, right? And not to make those assumptions. We were in the car having a conversation, and it wasn't about the two of us in the car, but you're telling the story, and I told this person, yada yada yada. And so a car pulls up, and they're like, is everything okay? It's like, yeah, everything is fine, right? You're making assumptions based on what you see, and there's no conflict there. They're just retelling a story of a scenario that happened, and so that's how that happens a lot, and we
Hmm.
don't see it because we're in it, and the issues that we're trying to resolve and overcome, they're hard. They're not easy. If they were easy, they would have already been resolved. Um,
Exactly.
but
And
there are a lot of good people with goodwill that want to see change.
yeah, and I would ask if that person's making an assumption because they asked the question, "Are you okay?"
Oh, of course they are, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just say that, like, so what's happening? Are you okay?
Mhm.
Yeah. It looks like something may be wrong. So let me ask. Let me put the question out there. Okay, so we've got 9 minutes to go, and we haven't really addressed the how to, except in to say that we need to create safe space. But then the next question, as I always say, how do we get that out to the community to let them know to talk to us? How do we get people engaged to having that conversation? How do we get their piece into the puzzle?
So to me, this is one of the ways, right? It's going to be all of the above. There's not going to be one answer to that. It's going to be podcasts like these where people listen in and at some point decide to join in. I think about Nick Martitha tried to join in, right? Looks like we're going to have an initiative of trying to invite different people to come on for 10 or 15 minutes. So that's one thing. Individually, again, doing the neighborhood potluck, that's a great one. For me, one of the reasons why it was an easy yes was for the Bainbridge Island Museum was one, Akuye asked me, but two, that gave me an opportunity to get to a city that I don't normally go to, right? I was just telling, I think I was telling Katie from the Bremerton Museum, shout out to her, that aside from the month of February, I probably have been to Bainbridge Island more in that month than I have been in the 20 years that I've lived in Kitsap County. So, that's saying a lot.
Yep.
And, folks were great. Folks were really cool. And so that gave me that opportunity. So being intentional about meeting other people that aren't in your normal circle, kind of expanding your comfort, not um, I would tell people in school, you don't need to get out of your comfort. You just need to expand it a little bit, right? A little bit goes a long way because if you jump out there and you get a bad experience, you're going back into your bubble, and it might be a couple years before you try to venture back out again. Just try to expand your bubble a little bit.
Mhm.
I can go downstairs and talk with the people in the co-op or the tattoo shop that's downstairs now in our building, and extend that to them. And so what can you do from an individual standpoint to start meeting people that aren't in your normal orbit and finding out who they are, how they think, what's
Yep.
important to them. And I do that with Mark. I do that with Pastor Ellington. I do that with, we're having a gang show on at 3 p.m. today, and there's a gentleman. His name is Anton. You should definitely check it out. But he was convicted at the age of 17. He spent 24 years in prison. He just got out last year, and he wants to talk to the youth and to adults and try to show them a different way. And so that's the puzzle piece, right? So yeah, come on to
Yes,
the
it is.
show. Let's have the conversation. Bring your voice to the table. You know, how can I help you help the people that are important to you, right? And then how can we hear from you what kinds of things might have helped for you not to be in a position to have made those choices as a 17-year-old kid, right? And so that's what that looks like. And so modeling that and showing it. I think the big way is modeling that, right?
Mhm.
And some many churches do that when they do their outreach programs and things of that nature, and just kind of expanding it. You're feeding the homeless, you're doing this, you're doing that. I'm a super big proponent, and I'll give it back to you, Mark, of I think people have more growth when you're not just giving something to someone, but you can allow them to help to give back while them they themselves receiving the help. And so for all the years I've been operating on that, um, kind of on that thought process, I've seen gains from people that have been more resiliency building in that. I want to say more sustainable, but I guess I do mean that in the sense that as you're climbing up the rung of self-sufficiency, when you're helping others, you're less likely to fall down the rungs. And when you are, you don't fall this far because you have been helping others, you have been building, you've been learning about yourself, you've been building knowledge, skills, and abilities that are transferable. And so it's just a powerful thing. So let me digress and give that back to you. But that's how I would answer that question and how I actually model that and do those things. And like I said, 3 o'clock, that's what's happening. So we can
Awesome.
see it.
I will see if I can be on for that. Um, in my experience working with people of less privilege, every single one of them who I've met want to help others like them and want to help other people. We have a lot of divisive language, and I've talked about this a few times. We talk about fighting something, like fighting climate change, fighting injustice, fighting this. But should we really be fighting it, or should we be cooperating to solve the problem? If people want to help other people, and there's language like many hands make light work, and so there's this dichotomy in the language we have. We're fighting this. I mean, what? We're swinging at the climate. We're swinging at the air. What are we doing here? Or are we cooperating and working together so that our many hands can make light work of the challenges of climate change, of building resilient communities, of building a human future? The only way we can do this is together. So we need to moderate our divisive language and start working to eliminate that portion of our communication so that we're talking about cooperation. So we're talking about coordination. So we're talking about working together.
Yeah. So what are you going to do next? What's going to be your next small or large thing to answer the question? How are you going to get people to the table this next week?
Well, I'm going to be talking to you offline about who we can get that has one of those big barbecue trucks. And I'm going to be talking to some people I know who are musicians in the area to see if we can put together a band to play at block parties.
Mark, what makes you think I know how to get access to a barbecue truck? What are you saying?
I'm just thinking that you might know somebody in your community, which is
Is it
broader than
because
my
my
community.
computer's in the way? Is it because of my figure? Is that what you're saying? Because I look like might like barbecue?
Well, not per se, but
I'm just messing with you. But that's what's important, right? So if anyone else said that to Mark, Mark's like, oh man, I just offended him. It's a problem. Oh my goodness. Building that relationship, you can have that relationship with someone and it can be playful. There's nothing to that, right?
yep.
Uh, it's man, we can do so much better, folks, and it really can be.
Yeah, and me, I'm being on video and on record here. I can't do what I would normally do when Marwan and I are together. This is what is
That's
it's
why I
saying it's
kept
because
how
of your
I learned
figure.
about the right
Yeah,
hand handshake, and I can't say
yeah.
on air. So
There you go. There are things that Marwan and I would say when we're off air that are probably not for what NSFW,
yeah,
not safe for work.
cancelable for sure.
Yes, but in the truth is we have an enormous amount of respect for each other, so that allows us to be very good friends and to overcome differences.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And
So aside
so,
from talking to me about a food truck, what else?
well, and about music, because what I'd like to do is put together the ability to host and sponsor, so to speak, uh, block parties in neighborhoods. First year neighborhood, our neighborhood. And by the way, we've been talking to people where we live, and they're very interested in coming together and having that conversation, and
Nice.
especially if there's food involved. So we want to start figuring out what the resources are and how we can access resources to offer block parties so people can start talking to each other and developing that networked neighborhood concept and build community. But that expects that the audience has homes, that they have community, that they have reach to their neighborhoods, and that isn't inclusive of all of the people. It's only inclusive of a portion of the people.
Well,
So
I
how do
kind
we
of
get
look
to the
at it.
people that? Go ahead.
I was gonna say I look at it as a pyramid scheme, right? So it's
Yep.
like, okay, every person go out and get two, and those people go out and get two, and then bring it to the larger group, right? Because and that's what I mean by expanding your bubble. You're not
Right.
gonna necessarily go and to the polar opposite and say, "Hey, I'm trying to figure this thing out," and do you that may be too much. You're going back into your bubble. So just expand it a little bit, and then bring the people that you've gathered together into the bigger circle. And I think that's the way that this could work pretty well.
Absolutely. And one of the resources we can have is Akuye and her husband have that sound system that was used by West Sound 350 for the climate event.
West
Um,
Sound 350.
yeah, they're a group out of Bainbridge Island that are focused on climate change.
Gotcha. Okay.
They're not an official 501, though 350 might be, but they're a group underneath that umbrella. And I know that they borrowed the sound system from Akuye from a discussion they had with her husband at the 9/11 event.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, you know what? We are over time, and
We are.
I am fasting today, so this talk about barbecue is painful, there, buddy.
I'm just ribbing you.
To the boom boom. Man, like I said, this hour goes so fast. It's probably one of my fastest hours for the podcast because there's so much to talk about and get into. We do look forward to you joining in. I did put in the chat, if you know anyone that does have a food truck or music for outside venues that want to help build community inclusiveness, please reach out to Mark or myself. You have our information, www.roseco.org, and Mark at roseco.org is his email.
Mhm.
And then, of course, you guys see how many different ways you can get a hold of me. Even if you type in the chat here, I'll make sure that it gets to where it needs to go. Final word, Mark?
Let's do this together.
That's it. I love it.
That's it.
All right. So for Mark, I am Marwan. This is The Conduit. We will see you next Wednesday.